Bhagavatam. Hello and welcome to the Bhagavatam. Today we're going to be talking about a number of different things. At first, I'd like to begin with a topic that came up a lot during my travel as I was traveling to India, coming back to the US. And I often get into conversations with people and they'd ask me things like, well, what do you believe in? And it's such a fascinating question for me. I love to say, I really don't believe in anything. So what do you mean? You do this channel on spirituality and you talk about religion, you talk about God. And to them I would say, tell me something, does God have a religion? What is the religion of God? Do you think God is a Muslim? Do you think God is a Christian? Do you think God is a Hindu? Do you think that Christ was a Christian? Do you think that Guru Nanak was a Sikh? No. Krishna was not a Hindu. None of these people, whether they were messengers of God, whether they were teachers about God, or whether they were God himself incarnating on this earth, ever came from the idea of a religion. They wanted to teach you something about love. They wanted to teach you something about spirit. They wanted to teach you something about life. But they were not about morality. They were not about do's and don'ts. And that's what most religion is. It's a dualistic paradigm that tries to control humans, and therefore, because of that, it tries to prove itself to be superior to all other religions. And because it's driven by ego, it tends to have been the cause of some of the most extensive killing of people in the world. Now, I've said a lot of controversial things. That religion is driven by ego. Absolutely. Wherever you feel there is a sense of I am better than you, there is ego. Wherever you feel that my way is the best way, my way is the way, whether you think that is said by God, whether that is said by a book, or whether that is said by a human, in all cases, it is not from the realm of God, it is from the realm of human beings. That is how human beings function. Human beings believe they know something, but human beings don't know anything. They think that because they're reading from a book, that that book is the absolute truth. No, it's not. Please be very careful. The book was received by someone and put down. Between the receiving and the recording, there can be our own filters that come in. It's happened to me. I have received so much of information and written it down, but I can also see my own filters in that. Filters in terms of what I'm asking, filters in terms of what I'm willing to accept, filters in terms of what I believe. All of that comes in. My own conditioning comes in. So let's not try to make it something that is absolute in that sense. It's not that God is not absolute. God is absolute. God is the absolute truth. Param Satyam is the word used in Sanskrit, the highest truth, the absolute truth. But because God is absolute doesn't mean that what we read or write or think or believe is absolute. It's a big difference. Because we are the medium through which God comes through. So it's very important to understand this. I've often had people say to me, oh, I pray to God so much, but why doesn't God talk to me? And I've said to them, when you're having a conversation with somebody, you can't have two people talking. This is common sense. I'm not talking something very high philosophy here. It's common sense that when two people are talking, one speaks and the other listens. If no one is listening and both are talking at the same time, it's a useless and ridiculous so-called conversation. It's not even a conversation. It's two monologues taking place at the same time. So why would God talk to you while you're talking in your prayer? You got to keep quiet. Got to keep your mind quiet. And only then can you hear God. But not only do you have to keep your mind quiet, you have to make your mind blank, like a blank canvas. What does it mean to be a blank canvas? It means I don't know anything. Enlighten me. Just like Arjun said to Krishna, I am confused about my duty. Please guide me. So when you realize that you don't know anything is when you'll become truly open to listening to what God or any teacher or spiritual guide has to say. It's very important to understand this, to come from the place of not knowing. Or as Socrates said, and I love that quote, you might have heard me say it a number of times, but I really like to bring it home. To know that you do not know is the greatest step to knowledge. So coming back to the original question, is God a Christian, a Buddhist, a Vedanta, a Sikh, a Hindu, a Jew? No. Whose God is the real God? Is God Allah? Is he Krishna? Is he Jehovah? Is he what? All the above and none of the above. Do you believe in God? Do you not believe in God? To me, God is not a belief. God is an experience. So when you experience something, do you believe it? Do you believe in sunsets? I don't think you do. You know sunsets. You've seen the sunset, right? You've seen the moon. You don't have to believe in the moon. You know there's such a thing. Similarly, when you experience God, then you know there is God. Now you say, well, only special people can experience God. I say, no, it's not true. That's a myth we've been told. We've been told that to keep us in our place. We've all been experiencing God. We've experienced God when we went to nature. We've experienced God when we went to the temples and mosques and churches. We've experienced God in each other. We have all been experiencing God. It's just that we're not joining the dots. Those things that we find most beautiful in the world are our experience of God. When we experience beauty in another human being, when we fall in love with another human being, when we love on our pets and our different creatures, when we go for a vacation, we are communing with God. It's just that people have taken God and put God into a box, the box of a temple, a church, a mosque, whatever that might be. And now people say, well, I don't believe in God. Well, you're absolutely right. I also don't believe in the God these people believe in. But it doesn't stop me from believing in God. You see, not the God that humans have concocted, but the God that is inescapable, that is everywhere. So then that brings us to the real question here. Is God pantheistic? Is God just found in nature? Or is God polytheistic? That is, are there many gods? Or is God monotheistic? Is there only one God? Is God pagan or God religious? And the answer to all those questions is God is whatever you want God to be. What would you like? What are you seeking? What do you want? It's like saying, is love only found in marriage? Or is it only found in sex? Or is it only found in romance? Now, what would you like love to be? Love is an energy, just as God is an energy. And I don't mean God is limited to energy. God can also have form. God can have whatever. You want to have a relationship with God, then God needs to have a form. If you want to love God, then God needs to exist as some kind of form, the beloved that you can love on. But if all you want is peace and release from suffering, well, then you can have that. And there are philosophies like Advaita that will show you how to do that. Are they right? Is Buddhism right? Is Advaita right? Is it more right than let's say, Bhakti, which teaches about devotion and love of God? No. There is no right or wrong when it comes to this path. There is no one way. What is right for you? What are you seeking? That is what makes it right. Right? Just for example, if you were on the market to buy something, you wanted to buy an electric car, then that's what's right for you. If you're in the market to buy a gasoline-powered car, an ICE engine as they call it, then that's what's right for you. Is it right for the world? Is it right for the environment? Those are different questions. You will have to come to all of that yourself. You will need to think deeper, and the deeper you think, perhaps the closer you'll get to an answer. But ultimately, it's on each of us. You say there is no God, so it is. You say there is God, so it is. You say God belongs to this religion, and so it shall be. And you say God has a form, yeah, and so God doesn't have a form, yes. Go right ahead. But whether you deny God or you love God, whether you believe in God or you experience God, it doesn't matter. Either way, it's about God. You see? And even if it is that you love life and you love people and you love yourself, ultimately, you're still loving God. Can't help it. We are all loving something. We are all experiencing something. We are all living something. And all of that together is telling us about God. When you experience pain and suffering, that is what it means to be separated from God, to be disconnected from God. When you're experiencing joy and love and things that elevate your spirit, you're experiencing God. What does it mean by elevating the spirit? It means when the spirit comes alive, when it wakes up, when it's vibrant and expressed, you're experiencing God. When it's shut down, then you're being cut off from God. What does it mean to shut down the spirit? It means to close your heart. Just like what does it mean to not fall in love? It means to close your heart. The more you open your heart, the more you begin to fall in love, not just with one thing, not just with one kind of person, but with all persons and all creatures and all of nature. That was the sign of the most highly evolved beings. They opened their heart wide open. And the same it is with God. You can narrow it down. Oh, I want to find a person to love who is going to be 6 feet tall, who's going to have this much money, who's going to look like this, have this, do this. Well, you're narrowing the field down. But you can open the field up to loving everyone. You can open the field of God to just being in this narrow place of your religion or of no God. Or you can open the field open and find God everywhere. I came across a wonderful little saying that once came to me while I was writing, and it said, ego is to edge God out, E-G-O. And if you flip those letters around, it is O-G-E, observe God everywhere. And that's really the heart of the matter. Are you observing God everywhere, or have you edged God out of your life? That's really the issue. And if you're somewhere in the middle of that, well, that's the most confusing place. Well, you say you believe in God, but you don't experience God. That's so sad, right? I believe in love, but I don't experience love. How sad is that? How sad is that? And why do you think you don't experience love? Because you narrowed love down to such a tiny little possibility that it barely could be found anywhere. But if you'd opened your heart up, you would have found love everywhere. The possibility was yours, like doing a Google search, right? You put in too many letters, too many words, too many criteria, and you get nothing. You open it wide, well, you get everything. What do you want, right? So really speaking, it's in your hands. You are the seeker, and you are the one who will experience, and you are the place where it shall be found. So Hinduism actually follows this idea, though I must be very clear, Hinduism doesn't exist. What exists is Sanathan Dharma, the eternal Dharma for humanity. And because each of us is different, and because that system, which is recorded in the Vedas, talked about a system that was designed for all of humanity, not about taking all of humanity and converting them and shoving them into a box of one kind of thinking, but rather giving humanity the freedom to have whatever kind of thinking they wanted, and in all forms of thinking, in all forms of worship, to bring people back to God. Just like the idea that there are many rivers, but they all come into the ocean. They ultimately land up there. So it is that at every human being, no matter what it is they're seeking, you may be seeking money right now, and wealth and fame and beautiful men, women, whatever is your search. Whatever it is you're seeking, ultimately, that seeking will lead you to God. Whether you believe it or not, whether you like it or not, whether you think it is so or not, doesn't matter. Ultimately, your seeking will lead you to God. But please, don't be wishy-washy in your seeking. Seek deeply, seek passionately, seek completely. Because when you seek, you shall find. You will find. And ultimately, you will find God. All right, so today in the Bhagavatam, we're going to be doing something very interesting. We're going to go first over a lineage. We've been discussing Kardam Muni and Devahuti in the last few episodes, and now we're into Canto number 4. Canto number 4 again goes into a very different journey. And here we're going to look at the idea that, well, of God in different forms, different aspects. First, we're going to come across, well, some very interesting things about the different personalities who are involved in bringing forth these populations of different human beings that we see today. How they attracted highly evolved beings, even gods, into their life and brought them into the world. After talking about that, we're going to go into some ideas about Shiva. We're going to talk a lot about Shiva over the next few episodes. There's going to be a lot coming up there. And we're going to find out who is Shiva and who is his wife, Durga, and how is Ganesh related to all of them. We're going to know some things that you've never heard before, perhaps. Most people haven't. And I welcome you to join us in this journey. So let's get on with the Bhagavatam. So, Brahma is known to be the creator of the universe in the Vedas. God doesn't personally create. God assigns, just like any CEO would do, any owner of a company would assign a CEO would have people under them. So similarly, there's an entire range of people, a hierarchy, of governance of the universe. Can't imagine God personally dealing with every single human being and then all the people on other planets as well. 8 billion of us here now and billions more in other planets. People say there's nothing there. Well, sorry, that isn't true. We've got nowhere near exploring the universe, and yet we reach conclusions like, oh, there's nothing out there. No. The Vedas tell us something very different. Anyways, it talks about the original sort of manifestation from Brahma was Swayambhuva Manu. Swayambhuva means he came from Brahma. Brahma literally thought him into existence. Manu. Manu, from whose name comes Manushya. Manushya means to be human. Right? So the original human was Manu. M-A-N-U. And Manu had 3 daughters. Akuti, Devahuti, and Prasuti. Now, if you remember Devahuti, she's the one that we've been talking about the last many episodes. And she's the one who married Kardam. And she's the one who had the son, Kapila. And we talked about the teachings of Kapila for quite a while. So, today we'll talk about some of the other sisters of Devahuti, or daughters of Manu. One of them was called Akuti. She married Ruchi. Now, it's very interesting. You'll see these girls were being married to sages. They weren't going around looking for lovers or love partners or romance or any of that stuff. That just wasn't a thing in that time. It wasn't a thing until about 300 years ago. But for all of time, parents arranged the marriage. Why? Because most of us, when we are in the throes of passion, romance, beauty, love, as we call it, we don't think very clearly. As a friend of mine once said, he said, what was that? He said, love is blind, and when you get married, you get your eyesight back. So meaning that when we're in love, we're blind to the other person's flaws and faults. So we can't really see and we can't really make the best choices. But then when we get married, or we start living with someone, we begin to see all their flaws, and they come as a big shock, because like, oh my gosh, is this what I was attracted to? And it comes as a reality check. And of course, there's many ways to work with that, and there's many wonderful ways in which to be able to use that as an opportunity to deepen your love and your relationship. But yeah, it's just one of those things that happen. So they knew that at that time, that this romance and love stuff doesn't go too far, because today you love someone, tomorrow, well, you fall out of love, and then you start loving another. There had to be a deeper, better way to do things. And so they would arrange the marriage of their children. Now, the greatest value in Vedic time was not how wealthy a person was not how powerful they were, was not how great a livelihood they had, whether they lived in a mansion or they were multimillionaire. It was not about how tall they were, how beautiful they were, or any of those things. It was about how spiritual they were. And so the richest people in the world, in this case kings, were looking for sages to marry their daughters to. Sages meaning people who had been deep into meditation and spiritual practice, people who were highly evolved, people with whom their daughters could have incredible children. So what is this about? Why would they have incredible children? Because when your consciousness is purified, then you bring into this world very highly evolved beings. And that's what they wanted to populate the world with, was highly evolved beings. Whereas if you do the opposite and you're immersed in materialistic ways, if you're immersed in your consciousness is at the base level of survival, or the base level of how to try to improve your status in life, or how to look good, or any of that stuff, well, then you're going to attract a much lower vibrational or much lower consciousness being. Many people today engage in what they call, what is referred to as Tantra in the West, and which is more about sexuality. But this has nothing to do with the original Tantra. Original Tantra was about deep meditation and practice, engaging in connection with all of nature, engaging in connection with the divine, the goddess or God, engaging with mantras that they would chant for hours and days before they even went to a partner. And the partner was a committed partner, not some person they randomly met at some play party or something like that, but rather someone they had a deep, intense connection with and were committed to and lived with and was deeply in their life for many years. And with such a person they engaged at all levels of connection, including sexuality. My point in bringing that up was they would then bring into that vibration very highly evolved states of consciousness for themselves and for any children or progeny that they might have. So that was the basic theme here, that by being in a highly evolved state, we would bring into the world highly evolved children. All right, so with that in mind, Akuti was married to Ruchi, a very powerful sage. Their son was Yagya, a partial incarnation of Vishnu. See, this is the quality of things. A partial incarnation of Vishnu comes to them. And their daughter Dakshina was a partial incarnation of Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune, the consort of Vishnu. And this way they had 12 children. Devahuti, the other sister, who we've been talking about, was married to the sage Kardam. They had 9 daughters. And they also attracted Kapila, again another incarnation of Vishnu. Their daughter Anasuya was married to Atri Muni. The great sage Atri had concentrated his mind through breathing exercises and by standing on one leg and subsisting on only air for 100 years. Now, this is, of course, at a different time, a time when people did live for that kind of duration. They lived for thousands of years, not just for 100 years as we do now. So, therefore, it's not hard to understand that there could have been, and there were, people who lived differently than we do now. I think sometimes we kind of don't understand that, and we think that this way of living that we have now, or the duration of life that we have now, is how it's always been. No, no. The Vedas, the Bible, so many of the scriptures of the world talk about different times and how people lived very differently then. So this person, Atri Muni, he had been in deep meditation. He was a great sage. He had prayed to God, saying, "May the Lord of the universe, of whom I have taken shelter, kindly be pleased to offer me a son exactly like him." I remember having such a prayer when my daughter was we were trying to conceive my daughter, and I thought to myself, having a child is a huge responsibility and something that you're going to have for years, a responsibility that's going to be there for the rest of your life. So what kind of child do I want to have? And to me, the thought was, I want someone who can be of service to humanity, someone who is going to bring something of value to this world to help make the world a better place, because that's kind of what I was trying to do as well. But Atri Muni over here takes it one step further. He says, "May the Lord of the universe, of whom I have taken shelter, kindly be pleased to offer me a son exactly like him." In the course of his meditation, as it says, for 100 years standing on one leg and subsisting only on air, a blazing fire emerged from his head, and the three deities of the universe came before him: Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Atri's eyes were dazzled by the effulgence of their bodies, and he asked, "I called for the Supreme Godhead, desiring a son like him, and I thought of him only. But although he is far beyond mental speculation of man, all three of you have come here. Kindly let me know, how have you come? For I am greatly bewildered about this." All three of them smiled and replied, "You are perfect in your determination, and therefore as you have decided, so it will happen. It will not happen otherwise. We are all the same person upon whom you are meditating. Therefore we have all come to you." They blessed him, saying, "We want all good fortune for you. You will have sons who are partial representations of us." So from the partial representation of Brahma, the moon god Soma was born. From the partial representation of Vishnu, the great mystic Dattatreya was born. And from the partial representation of Shiva, Durvasa was born. So what's the relevance of all this? Again, really looking at how consciousness shapes reality. Our consciousness not only leads to our own evolution and and the changes that occur within us, but they determine the kind of people we're going to associate with. It's again another really important thing. What kind of friends will you have? It is important that you surround yourself with a sangha, with a group of friends who are of similar vibration. And if you're going to go with people who are not of the same vibration, at least do not come necessarily and become one of them, but rather bring your joy, your love, your presence, your qualities into their life. Contribute. And that is one of the most satisfying things you can do as a human being, is to contribute. Now going back to the third daughter of Manu, remember we had Devahuti, and her sister was Akuti. And now she had a third sister, Prasuti. 13 of them. She was married to Daksha. Now the story is getting interesting because it is moving in a certain direction, which I will tell you off in a few minutes as you'll get to see it. So Prasuti was married to Daksha, and together they had 16 daughters. 13 of them were given to the sage Dharma. One of them, Murti, gave birth to Narayan, the supreme Godhead who appeared as a human and God in one as one. And on the appearance of Narayan, it is said, the entire world was full of joy. Everyone's mind became tranquil. And thus in all directions, the air, the rivers, the mountains became pleasant. Someone was asking me about that. Well, how do you know which path is the right path? I said to him, I said, you know, you're following the path of God when what you do brings harmony, brings peace, brings unity. Where there is division, where one group says, my way is better than your way, where one person thinks my path is better than your path, that is not of God. That is not the vibration of God. So you will find this everywhere, that where there is harmony, where there is God, where there's God, there will be harmony. Where there is the presence of that energy, you will find peace. You will find tranquility. You can literally choose that within your mind. Is this experience producing tranquility for me? Is it producing peace? Is it producing harmony? Is it producing a sense of love? Is it creating openness? Is it creating spontaneity? Is it creating a feeling of aliveness in me? If so, then this is from God. And if it is creating a sense of superiority or a sense of grandiosity or a sense of right and wrong, it is creating a sense of judgment against others and righteousness for yourself. Like someone said to me, you know, this is about righteousness. Dharma is about righteousness. And I said, no, Dharma is not about righteousness. That's a wrong translation. Dharma, Arjun was fighting for Dharma. Arjun's fighting for Dharma was not a fight for righteousness. No. Because from all righteous perspectives, his cousin, Duryodhan, had won Arjun's kingdom in a gambling match from him. Yes, you can say they were cheated, fine, but it was still a gambling match. And they still lost. They participated and they lost. So once they lost, right? You can't go back to the casino and say, hey, you guys cheated me. You know, the house always wins and I want my money back. The casino's going to say, get out of here. And that's what happened with Duryodhan. And everybody still thinks Arjuna and the Pandavas and Krishna were in the right place. They were fighting the battle of Dharma, and the other guys were fighting were on the side of adharma, the opposite of Dharma. They were the bad guys. But what makes them the bad guys? They won the gambling match. Why are they the bad guys? Because Dharma unites. Dharma is compassionate. Dharma is caring. Dharma is loving. Dharma is uplifting. When you take righteousness and you use it as a weapon with which to harm others, if you convert people by the sword, or if you convert people by the gun, or if you go out there telling them their ways are wrong and your way is right, that is adharma. What they have been spreading all over the world is adharma. It is not the path of God. It is the path that is against God. The ideas that people have had about God, that God is some person who punishes people and sends them to hell, that is adharma. It is against the nature of God. It is an insult to God. And nobody should be led to think that way. Really, it is so damaging to the psyche of humanity that we have allowed this to spread and to spread so widely. But the symptom of where God is present is what is described here. When Narayan appeared, the entire world was full of joy. Everyone's mind became tranquil, and thus in all directions the air, the rivers, the mountains became pleasant. Can our science stand up to this test? Can our technology stand up to this test? Or have we contaminated the air, the rivers, the mountains, and instead of them becoming pleasant, they have become unpleasant. They have become unlivable. Everything in nature has been thrown off balance. These are the symptoms by which you know whether we're heading in the right direction or not. Let me continue. In the heavenly planets, bands began to play and they showered flowers from the sky. Sages chanted Vedic prayers, the Gandharvas and Kinnaras sang, and beautiful Apsara damsels danced, and all signs of good fortune were visible. The demigods prayed, may the Supreme Godhead, who has created peace and prosperity, destroy all calamities of the created world by bestowing his glance of mercy upon us. That Naranarayan Rishi, who is a partial expansion of Krishna, has now appeared in the dynasties of Yadu and Kuru in the form of Krishna and Arjun respectively to mitigate the burden of the world. So it's saying here, Nara and Narayan was the union of human and divine in one being. And now they're saying that Nara Narayan has appeared as Krishna and Arjun, Arjun being the human and Krishna being the divine, has appeared at that time in the dynasties of Yadu and Kuru in the forms of Krishna and Arjuna to mitigate the burdens of the world. So that's another thing, another way you know that when you have something that is a divine path, it will mitigate the burdens of the world. It will mitigate the disharmony. It will mitigate the suffering. The youngest daughter of Daksha and Prasuti, so now the third sister, that is Devahuti's second sister, Prasuti, was married to Daksh. And together, as we said earlier, 13 of them were given to one sage, and then someone married another, and then the last girl, her name was Sati. Sati is very important. She fell in love with Shiva and married him. Now her father was deadly, absolutely, vehemently opposed to their union. And he would rebuke Shiva in spite of Shiva's faultlessness. Consequently, ultimately, after much ado of all that happened, Sati gave up her body by dint of yogic mystic power. She literally willed herself to burn up in flames. So we're going to read the story about how that happened, why that happened. Let's begin with trying to understand a little something about who is Shiva. These are how pictures depict him. Shiva is known to be the adi-yogi. Adi means the original, and yogi is the mystic. Yoga is meant for mysticism or union with God. Here Shiva is shown with his bull Nandi, and in front of him is the Shivling with which he is worshipped, a little black object that you see in front. I'll tell you more about it as we go along. Some more pictures of Shiva, and you'll often see he's up on the mountains in the Himalayas. It is known to be the mountain of Shiva. It is known to be a very magical, mystical, and powerful place. Shiva is extremely powerful. Shiva is more powerful than any human and any demigod. He is known to be the Mahadeva, the most powerful of all the devas, the great deva, the greatest of all the demigods. Oh, and that, by the way, was Shiva in his dance at the end of the creation, when the time comes, millions of years have passed, the 100 years of Brahma have finished, and which is equal to, I think, a few billion years of earth. Then at that point, Shiva does his dance and the entire creation is annihilated, goes back into nothingness, and then again is recreated. Shiva is worshipped also in many different ways over India, and this is the latest form that was created of adi-yogi by Sadhguru. This is in the south of India. And he's made a huge monument to Shiva there. This is how Shiva is worshipped in temples with the Shivling, and they pour milk, that is milk that you see around it. This is from my recent visit to India. And this is Shiva with his family. So although Shiva is a great renounced mystic, his family, he's married, he has a family. He is married to Sati, who became Parvati, who later on went on to become Durga and even Kali and all the different other manifestations. And there is Ganesh sitting with them. He is their son. Why he has the elephant head, we'll talk about in episodes to come. I can't get into everything at one time, but I'm going to take you back to the roots of Shiva. And that again is his wife, Sati, then Parvati, and now here in her manifestation as Durga, sitting on a tiger. She is much loved and worshipped, as is Shiva, all over India. So the sage Vidura is speaking to Maitreya and he asks him, Shiva is the greatest amongst the demigods and the spiritual master of the entire world, the guru of the entire world. He is free from enmity, peaceful and self-satisfied. So Shiva in his deepest meditation is so connected with the divine, so completely immersed, that nothing and no one can disturb him. And now we have this most highly evolved being of all in an altercation. So here's what Vidura is asking. Why was Daksha, remember Daksha was married to the sister of Devahuti, Prasuti. And they had a daughter, if you remember, called Sati. And Sati fell in love with Shiva. Now Shiva with his matted locks, and if you look at his pictures, he's wearing deer skin, he's covered, his body is covered with ash. He lives often in a graveyard or up in the mountains where it's cold and freezing. And so Sati is a princess. And her father, Daksh, doesn't want her to marry this crazy looking guy, in his opinion. He doesn't know anything about who Shiva is. He just sees this fellow. He's sometimes got a garland of... he's surrounded by crazy looking people, ghosts and hobgoblins and other such. And why would he want his daughter to marry such a person? So Vidur is asking, why was Daksh, who was so affectionate towards his daughter, why was he envious of Shiva? Why was he inimical towards such an auspicious personality who is the best amongst the gentle? Why would such a son-in-law and father-in-law quarrel be so bitter that the great goddess Sati would give up her life? Maitreya replied, in a former time the leaders of the universal creation had all gathered to perform a great ritual. Now, the rituals in those days were known as yagya. Yagya was often with fire, and in the fire they would pour ghee, and they would offer fruits and vegetables and other things. And it was just an incredible performance. And we see a little bit of that in today's time when they do the marriage yagya, or in some other places where they do the fire sacrifice. You see that. So all the demigods and yogis and Brahmins and their followers had assembled, and there was this giant yagya that was being done. And then Daksh entered. And it says the entire assembly was illuminated by his bodily luster, which was as bright as the effulgence of the sun. Everyone seemed insignificant in his presence. They all stood in respect, except for Brahma, who was his grandfather, and Shiva, his son-in-law. Now, so that means by this time, Sati had already managed to marry Shiva. There was a lot of struggle getting there, and we'll maybe cover some of that as we go along. Perhaps not this time, but the next time. Brahma was the president of the assembly and welcomed Daksh. Daksh was very offended, however, to see Shiva sitting and not showing him any respect. He became very angry. With his eyes glowing, he began to speak against Shiva. Please hear me with attention, he said to everybody. For I speak about the manners of gentle people. I do not speak out of ignorance or envy. Shiva has spoiled the name and fame of the governors of the universe and has polluted the path of gentle manners. Because he is shameless, he does not know how to act. He has already accepted himself as my subordinate by marrying my daughter and has pretended to be like an honest person. He has eyes like monkeys, yet he has married my daughter, whose eyes are like those of a deer cub. Nevertheless, he did not stand up to receive me, nor did he think it fit to welcome me with sweet words. I had no desire to give my daughter to this person who has broken all the rules of civility. Because of not observing the required rules and regulations, he is impure. But I was obliged to hand over my daughter to him. Apparently Brahma had asked him to marry Sati and Shiva. Daksh continued. He was on a rant. He was completely, besotted, completely overcome with anger. He said about Shiva, he says he lives in a filthy place like crematoriums, and his companions. So crematoriums, you should understand, in India are not electric crematoriums. They are not places where we were talking about thousands of years ago. They didn't put bodies into some little box where everything was neat and there and it came out with ash. No, they took a whole bunch of wood, placed the body on top of that, set the whole thing on fire with ghee, with mantras, with all of that, and the whole thing, it's quite a sight. It's quite a thing to really see your loved one placed on that fire and to see their body being burnt, and to realize at that time that this is the fate of all of us. This is where we go. This is where we come from. It's not unlike in Christianity where they'll dress up the body and bury it nicely, make everything look really good, put them in their finest of clothes. In Hinduism, no, it's very, very stark, very rare. In the Vedic system, a cremation ground is covered with ash because, the bodies are being burnt out there. And it's considered a very impure place, but Shiva would often live there. Why? Because you'll notice something very interesting if you ever went to an Indian cremation, especially in a crematorium like you have in India. One may not be the case here. But most people at that time, for those few moments that they're there, seeing this happen, become very enlightened. They realize, oh my gosh, this is going to happen to me too. We're all in the same boat. And they become very humble, and they become very gentle, and they become very reflective and philosophical until they step back out on the street into their cars and drive away. And then the world hits them, and then the illusion of everything suddenly takes over. And then they're back again. And as quickly as they came in to that state of remembrance, they go back into the state of forgetfulness. So, Daksh says he lives in filthy places like crematoriums, and his companions are the ghosts and demons. Naked like a madman, sometimes laughing and sometimes crying, he smears crematorium ashes all over his body. He does not bathe regularly, and he ornaments his body with a garland of skulls and bones. Therefore, only in name is he Shiva, or auspicious. Shiva means auspicious. Actually, he is most mad and inauspicious creature. Thus, he is very dear to crazy beings in the gross mode of ignorance, and he is their leader. Not everything in this world is what it seems to be. Sometimes a homeless person can give you the greatest wisdom. Sometimes a person who is insane can speak the greatest truths. You never know through what, through whom, and how God reveals himself to you. Daksh continued, on the request of Brahma, I handed over my chaste daughter to him, and although he is devoid of all cleanliness and his heart is filled with nasty things. Then Daksh cursed Shiva with the following words, the demigods are eligible to share in the oblations of fire, but Shiva, who is the lowest of all the demigods, should not have a share. Despite the request of all assembled, Daksh, in great anger, cursed Shiva, then left the assembly and went back to his home. Now I want you to really reflect as you're listening to this. What made Daksh see Shiva in this way? Shiva is known to be the most gentle, yet he saw him as the worst. Shiva is known to be the most pure, yet he saw him as the most filthy. Shiva is known to be the most enlightened and most evolved, and yet he saw him as an unclean, good-for-nothing, useless person. Why this difference in perception? Have you ever come across an experience in which you saw someone very differently than other people saw that person? Where you saw, let's say, their goodness, but other people only saw flaws in them, or vice versa? Right? What was that like? Were you ever able to break out of that perception and maybe see the other side? Maybe you thought somebody is a horrible person and then eventually got to know them a little better and realized, oh my gosh, I didn't realize how you are. My first impressions of you were also negative. And then I finally realized, that none of that was true. You see, our mind plays tricks. Our mind makes things up and is constantly deluding us. Do we see the world as it is, or do we see the world as we are? And if we're seeing the world as we are, then really speaking, we need to stop and examine our own thinking. Because wherever there is judgment, and there's clearly judgment in the case of Daksh here, wherever there is judgment, that's coming from us. That may have nothing to do with reality. It doesn't mean that there aren't people who sometimes do horrible things. But then again, our judgment is our business. Our interpretation of that situation, our evaluation of what's going on, our thoughts about something, that has nothing to do with reality. Just because you think someone is bad doesn't mean he is bad or she is bad. Just because you think they're good doesn't mean they're good. Perhaps good and bad are very shallow ways in which to define anyone, because we're a mixture of all kinds of things. We have flaws. We do crazy things sometimes. But are we defined by those things? And that's the challenge I want you to really start applying into your life with everyone you come across. To stop putting them in the box of good or bad, of right and wrong, and to start seeing yourself and others from a lens that is neither good nor bad, neither right nor wrong. And then how do you live? What does it look like then? I'd like you to examine that. Maybe write to me in the comments or the text and tell me what you think life would be like if you didn't think in those terms, if you didn't act as Daksh is acting here, where he's judging and cursing. Anyways, the effect of cursing, let's see what that had on all these people who were there. So now you have someone, Nandishwar, who is one of Shiva's principal associates, on hearing this became greatly angry. Like when you love someone and someone insults that person, clearly you become angry, you become upset. His eyes became red, and he prepared to curse Daksh and all those present there who had tolerated Daksh's cursing Shiva in harsh words. Nandishwar said, anyone who has accepted Daksh as the most important personality and neglected Shiva because of envy is less intelligent, and because of seeing things in duality will be bereft of transcendental knowledge. Dash has accepted the body as all in all and is attached to material life. Within a short time he will have the face of a goat. Now, I'm not clear about why goat was what he chose, but apparently that is exactly what happened. Daksh received the body of a goat, or rather the face of a goat. And again, I'll try to get you some more information about all of that by the next time we meet. Nandishwar continued, those who have purposely insulted Shiva and are envious of him have become dull and attached to karmic activities. They shall continue in the repeated cycle of birth and death. The powerful cursing going on here. These Brahmins take to education, austerity, and vows only for the purpose of maintaining the body. They shall be devoid of discrimination between what to eat and what not to eat. They will acquire money begging from door to door simply for the satisfaction of the body. Then the sage Bhrigu, as a reaction, condemned the followers of Shiva with a very powerful curse. So there's a cursing and counter-cursing going on. Yes, what happens, right? We get into an argument with somebody and now that person is yelling at us and we're yelling at them, and there's no ending this. And it's awful. Everything that everyone says is awful. So now we have great sage Bhrigu, who is now gone into being reactive. And he condemns the followers of Shiva with a very powerful curse, saying one who takes a vow to satisfy Shiva and who follows his principles will certainly become an atheist and be diverted from the transcendental path of the Vedas. Those who vow to worship Shiva are so foolish that they imitate him by keeping long hair on their heads. They initiate into worship of Shiva. They prefer, or rather, when initiated into worship of Shiva, they prefer to live on wine and flesh and other such things. Now, that's not all people, but some who abuse Shiva's kindness and compassion, misuse that, and then start indulging in all kinds of things. Since they blaspheme the Vedas and the followers of Vedic principles, it is understood they have already taken shelter of the doctrine of atheism. The Vedas give the eternal regulative principles for auspicious advancement and well-being of human civilization and for all living entities. By blaspheming the principles of the Vedas, which are the supreme path of spiritual advancement, certainly the followers of Shiva will descend to the standard of atheism without a doubt. So, with that, I'm going to bring, well, it's a little bit more. All right, let's read that too. When such cursing and counter-cursing was going on between Shiva's followers and the parties of Daksh and Bhrigu, Shiva became very morose. Not saying anything, he left the arena of the sacrifice, followed by his disciples. The sacrifice, however, continued, and this yajna that was performed went on for a while, after which all the demigods who were performing the sacrifice took their bath at the confluence of the Ganges and the Yamuna, and after thus being purified in heart, they departed for their respective abodes. There is a lot that occurs now with Shiva, and we'll be discussing that in the episodes to come, so stay tuned. A lot to share with you. But for now, I've just sort of sown the initial seeds, and I'd like to hear your thoughts. So I'm going to turn over to those of you who are on Zoom or who are on the live stream on YouTube or anywhere else where you might be watching. I'd love to hear your questions. I see a few questions have already come in, and if any others would like to comment, please write it down. Here's your chance now. Okay. Celie writes a beautiful comment out here. Be still and know that I am. Well, according to the Bible, I think it's be still and know that I am God. It's a very powerful statement, such a powerful statement. But most followers of the Bible do not understand this. If you practice meditation, you'll understand this. It's saying, be still. Where still? Doesn't mean you stand still and just freeze and don't move. No, not like that still. It means let your mind be still. Be still and know, not believe, not have faith, and know that I am God. Because only in stillness can you know God. Only when your mind is quiet will you experience God. That's what I was saying in the beginning. Thanks for picking up on that, Silly. It is not possible to know God out of a book. It is not possible to know God even out of listening to all these talks. These are all meant to indicate the way as a map indicates the journey. But you must walk the journey. You can't just know what it's like to be in Paris unless you go there. You can't know what it's like to be in London or in Swiss Alps or India, for that matter, unless you go there. You can hear about it, you can talk about it, you can read books about it all you want, but the experience of going there and being there is a whole different thing. So it's very relevant, very important to understand that experience ultimately trumps, overshadows all other, intellectual pursuit or intellectual understanding. All right, any other questions? Does anybody else have something they'd like to ask? Seeley writes, timely session as I am unsettled and angry after my cousin passed away last year because her estranged sister denied her even at her passing. Yes, sometimes we hold such grudges. I'm not sure what the causes were for your sister's experience, or her sister's experience rather. But sometimes we hold such grudges, we hold such negativity and feelings towards people who are close to us that it poisons our life. I've seen people do this with their parents. And personally to me, I find that if you don't resolve things with your parents, your spiritual growth becomes really slowed down. If you don't care for them as they get older, your selfishness increases. It's something so important here for us to resolve all our grievances, for us to let go all of our anger. You see in here the story of Daksha and how angry he is with Shiva. Shiva is such an incredible being. Shiva is so powerful, such a great lover of God and mystic and one of the most highly evolved beings, not one of the, but the most highly evolved being there is. And yet, Daksha hates him because he doesn't fit into Daksha's paradigm of what is good and what is right and what is gentle and how people should be. So we too have our ideas of how people should be. And as a result of those ideas, we get upset with them because when they don't do the things we think that they should do, then we're mad at them. And sometimes we'll hold on to our anger even till the point when they die. And now the karma that has built up between us will bring us back together in each other's lives, and we will have to then suffer each other all over again. It's been very important in my life to be able to try and talk to people and resolve the pain that I may have caused them or they may have caused me. Because if we don't release, we will repeat. It is important to release, and to release you need to heal, and to heal you need to bring it from the murky layers where it's hidden, where the pain is hidden, where the hurt is hidden, where the resentment is hidden, and bring it up and let it go. You may have done something to someone 50 years ago. They're still holding on to it. But time has passed. But the problem is they lived on with it. They kept holding it. They kept holding it. The more you hold something, the more toxic it gets. The faster you can let it go, the more free you will be. But letting go something very quickly is not about forgiveness. And most people jump to forgive, but it's not healthy, jumping to forgive. You want to forgive someone, you must really see, okay, what did this experience teach me? What did I learn here? Once you've learned something out of that experience, once you've understood and taken responsibility for how you had a role in it, you are not a victim. No matter what it is, you have a role in it. However you attracted it, you may say, well, this person is innocent, this child is innocent. Yet we don't know their consciousness. We don't know where they've been in past lives. We don't know what it is that is causing this to happen. So I would just say, when you feel victimized by someone, recognize that at some level, either in your past life or in your present or somewhere, you've had thoughts that generated the experience you're having now. It can be really hard to accept that. Sometimes it doesn't even seem fair or right. And I grant you that 100%. And I still say, look deeper. What if there was a deeper cause? Because we don't know the continuum of time. What you may have done to someone, they might be now doing to you. And it might be coming out even worse. We've all been all kinds of things to each other. We've been murderers and rapists and done horrible things. All of us. You may be in a woman's body, you may have been a man's body earlier. You may be Christian now, you may have been Muslim earlier. Or vice versa. You may have been maybe Muslim now and you might have been Christian earlier. Or Jews and Muslims. In past lives, people have been in the opposite shoes. The point is to really understand that we are all struggling. And the way out of suffering is not by running from it, not holding on to it, but by addressing it and releasing it. Then you can forgive if you want. But don't jump to it. First learn from it. And the biggest learning is to recognize you're not a victim, to take responsibility for that experience. If you got angry, if you got hurt, if you got sad, where is that hurt? Where is that sadness? Where is that anger? Here. What's it coming from? From an idea that this person should not have behaved the way they did, should not have done what they did. So whose idea is that? Your idea. If you didn't have that idea, how would it be? You see how you then turn it around. If I didn't have this idea of how people should be, maybe it's a commonly accepted idea. Maybe everybody thinks that this is how people should be. Fine, I don't care whether one person believes it or 1 billion people believe it. It doesn't matter. The point is the very idea of how people should be is what causes the upset. What if I let go my idea? It's after all only an idea, it's a belief, it's only a value system, whatever you want to call it. What if I let it go? Then would I still be angry? Would I still be resentful? No. What does it teach me? It teaches me that I am generating my own experiences. Me not liking something is something I'm generating. The person is doing what they're doing, but I'm generating my reaction to that. I could as well sit in front of this person who's doing something that I think is completely horrible or unacceptable and be completely indifferent to what they're doing. I don't have to have a judgment. It's not necessary. It's a choice. I don't have to condemn someone or put them down or be angry with them. That's a choice. Now, if that anger, if that helps in them, helps bring the point home, and if they're able to see and do things differently or better, well, give it a try. But thank you for sharing your thoughts and your opinions and your own pain here that you're experiencing. Thank you, Silly. And thank you, all of you that are here. Appreciate your presence. And I'll see you next week. Jai Shri Krishna. Hare Krishna. Radhe Radhe.